الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين. These will be inshallah the seventh talks on the Manazil of Khawaja Abdulla Ansari. And I think since some of you are new to these talks, I'd like to maybe spend a few minutes to try to recapitulate where we are and where we came from. The idea, first of all, of holding these talks was first discussed or broached in a meeting that we had with Sheikh Kabir about 9 months ago, I believe in September of last year, when I brought up the idea and Sheikh Kabir welcomed it, and it was really a profound signal to go ahead with these talks and to give them their due. I had written a short introduction to these talks before I started, and it gives you the background of who Sheikh Ansari was and what were the purposes of these descriptions of the stations along the path, stations of the Wayfarer to unicity of oneness. But really, before we even embark on these talks, I try to make it clear that we have to recover, as it were, some of the requirements that early our predecessors might have taken for granted. And like in any program that requires preparation, that requires careful planning, these stations are not to be taken lightly. They have to be approached with the right courtesy, with the right training. And I don't want to belabor this point, but I'd like to compare it to going on a course of, for example, mountaineering. You don't just jump suddenly into the base camp and expect to scale Mount Everest. You have to prepare yourself. You have to go through a process of physical training, psychological training, so that when you have the predisposition and the desire, and you have the will to move to the base camp, you are prepared. Otherwise, the journey will become extremely strenuous, and those who embark it without the right approach, without the right training, may not necessarily get the appropriate advantage. So it is when we start on any course of spiritual training, if you want to call it that, we have to take into account the circumstances and the context in which we start. And it is to do with what I believe is the weakening of the sense of the sacred that exists in modern man, and the loss of this sensibility, or its degradation, is an absolute requirement to regain it in order to embark on a path such as this. So, although the stages of the Wayfarer are in clusters of 10, each of which has 10 doorways, as it were, I sort of introduced a prerequisite to that, an early stage, a stage where a person who seeks to embark on this path generates within himself or herself the necessary prerequisites, as it were. So, without that, I believe the exercise, although interesting from a discursive point of view, from an academic point of view, does not really achieve its stated objective. So, a true wayfarer is a person who has prepared himself or herself for the task and is willing, is desiring, is desirous of taking the plunge, as it The first talk, the first stage, dealt with what Ansari called the stage of the beginnings. And it is to do with the fundamental grounding of the wayfarer. We need to be alert, aware, and above all, willing to let go of the certainties that define a person in the modern context. And these certainties are very, very hard to give up, because it's through that prism that we tend to see or appreciate and understand reality. So we have to be prepared at the end of the first set, as it were, first class. We have to be prepared to let go. The second cluster of talks dealt with the stage of the gateways. And it is to do with the wayfarer's immersion, initial immersion into the realm of the intangible. And it's to do with the cultivation of qualities such as self-effacement, quiet confidence in the outcome, and a need to begin to interact with what is not physical, what is not temporal, what is not subject to cause and effect in a familiar way. And from that you lead to the third gateway, as it were, or the third station, which is the stage of the transactions. And this is where one's qualities begin to express themselves in the outer realm, so that they affect one's dealings with others, they affect one's dealing with oneself, as well as with the higher, subtler realities. And this is where one begins to yield to the force of a higher reality. This is where you begin to consciously become aware of its action, that it's a force that prevails and that overpowers and overwhelms. And you begin to sense it and sense its contours and boundaries and its power at this stage. The fourth discourse dealt with the stage of the ethics. And here they are to do with the grounding of the wayfarer and in the nobler quality of the path, what is known as futuwah, or spiritual chivalry, where the ethics of conduct begin to color the actions and the dealings and the perceptions and the interactions of the individual. And they become established as an integral part of the wayfarer's character. And this leads to the fifth stage, which is the stage of the usul, or the fundamentals, where here it is the will to continue becomes really paramount in the individual. It is no longer a question of being propelled by a force that is partly due to reason and partly due to intellection. It is a force that drives you forward. It is a force that creates in you the will and the desire to move towards the objectives. And once this wheel, as it were, set in motion, the wayfarer begins to experience a different perceptions that form, in fact, the beginnings of a new consciousness. With this kind of new weapon, you enter into the sixth station, which is the station of the valleys, where there are risks as well as great rewards to be expected by the person on that path. Because these valleys have within them the conflicting, as it were, or contradictory objectives of ease as well as great risk. The person becomes aware of his or her new consciousness. The person becomes, as it were, amazed or dazzled by it, and may overlook the need to maintain limits and boundaries. Here in this valley, the station of the valleys, the force that propels the person moves from being, as it were, self-propulsion to a force of attraction. The nature of what pushes you changes. It moves from being one that emerges from your inner realities, as it were, from your enhanced awareness, from your greater sense of awareness and focus on the subtler realities, to a different force that pulls it. So, jazb, as we say in Arabic, a kind of magnetic force that has its own reality. And here at this point, the Wayfarer is called upon to yield to this attractive force, as it were. I've said in many cases that these stations are not really mechanistic or deterministic paths towards enlightenment. They are more like milestones that we are able to experience if we are properly positioned and are prepared to take in the signals, as it were. Their import, their significance is multiplied many times over if we conjoin what we know from reason, what we know from the intellect, or the faculty that is able to connect with the unseen, with practice. And practice is really a fundamental aspect of making these stations not only part of one's inner being, but allow one to refine them and to perfect them as one continues. And this practice can be at the individual level or can be at the group level. And I think the mix between the two is a matter of personal predisposition. For one person, collective dhikr might be the doorway. For another, it might be vocation, the house of supplication. For another person, it might be through service, through serving the community, through serving the poor, the destitute, serving the young. It could take a solitary form for some people. Some people do not have the predisposition to be in large groups. Or it can be in a formal setting or an informal setting. But above all, there has to be an element of praxis to it. Now, I don't have a manual for this. Maybe somebody would be able to write one for it, where you are able to join, as it were, the understanding of the Manazil at the level of the intellect and the heart, and understanding it at the level of practice. But above all, it's a matter of predisposition, of taste, of desire and will. If you don't have that and the right mixture, these stations are not able to yield the fruits which you may have been expecting. And it's not everybody's taste. Taste is something I'll come back to when I discuss, inshallah, the seventh discourse. But without that taste, or without the mixture, the right mixture between predisposition, taste, desire, you may be able to go through the stations up to a certain level, but they will not necessarily lead you to the end result, which is the immersion in tawheed, oneness. I don't think one should look at it as a failure. I mean, some people stop at the lowest rungs. It's not because they have failed, it's because their mix is different. Each one's mix is different. And Atta's poem, which I was bringing up, is that they started with 30,000 birds and ended up with, at the end, 30. There were 30,000 people or birds with predisposition, taste, will, and desire. But at the end, the appropriate mix only applied to a few. I think this by itself should not be seen in any ways as a reverse or as a failure. You do what you can to the limit of your ability within your construct. And that construct is the way in which the unseen interacts, the way that spirit interacts with soul to produce self, and the way that these engage with each other. Each one then becomes a unique vehicle, a vessel for this. So do not feel in any way that you have not met the promise, as it were, of complete unfolding. The important thing is to exert yourself within this mixture that I have discussed. Also, the Manazil, I would like to say, or any other spiritual system, is not a substitute for an outer forms of ritual or devotion. It is a significant complement to it. It is not a separate creed. I don't think any inner path can exist without an outer form. And I might add, vice versa. The outer form protects it, the outer form covers it, and the inner form acts as its secret, as it were. The end goal is not guaranteed. What is guaranteed is the mercy. So with this introduction, with your permission, Sheikh, I'll go to the seventh stage, seventh discourse, which is the stage of the state, al-ahwal. Ansari talks about this state as having 10 doors. Each doorway leads to the next. So if you go through doorway 1, you're supposed to then at its end, at the beginning of doorway 2. The 10 doors of the states are the door of love or muhabba, vigilance or ghira, ardor or shawq. Ardor can also be yearning, because I remember I've used the word ardor before. So yearning, apprehensiveness or qalaq, thirst, which is atash, ecstasy, astonishment, hayaman, which is a hard word to translate, but I translate as being overwhelmed or drowned. Al-barq, which is lightning flashes, and finally taste. And as is his wont, or as is his custom, Khawaja Ansari always begins the stages with a sort of succinct summary at the beginning. When the Wayfarer is still in the stage of the values, that's stage number 6, the element of yearning and striving still prevails. The Wayfarer then gradually moves into the stage where the forces of propulsion and inspiration are evenly balanced. When inspiration overcomes the efforts exerted by striving, which are the last stages of the values, and solicitude, concern, and tranquility are firmly established, then he or she will enter the stage of the states. It starts with love, which originates with the love that the truth has for creation. Love obviates the strains of effort and struggle, and the path becomes strewn with expressions of joy and ecstasy. My own comment on that is that the stage of the states is the first of the final cluster in the stations of the Wayfarer, coinciding with a change in the nature of the journey. And here, as I earlier stated, it is to do with the nature of the force which propels or moves you forward. Before, it was a force that was inner generated. You are moving because of your desire and will and so on. You've now entered a condition where the doors have opened, are beginning to open. And what pulls you is more important, more significant than what propels you. So you don't need to exert the same degree of inner effort. You are then drawn. The engine that moves you is no longer your exertions. It is more to do with inspirations, flashes, and more or less continuous openings. And they can come in the oddest of places, in the most unusual or unexpected times. They are real. And they act as constant signs and affirmations and confirmations. And the cornerstone of that is love. I have a comment on love later, but it is not it is to do with the force that brings two tools together, that unites the tools. So the first doorway is the doorway of love and mahabbah. And as is the wont, it starts with a Quranic ayah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فسوف يأتي الله بقوم يحبهم ويحبونه. Allah will bring forth a people whom He loves and who love Him. And Ansari comments, love is when the heart is suspended between concern and intimacy on the one hand and effacement on the other. And here we're talking about love as it applies to the passage of the spiritual journey, spiritual wayfarer. Love is the first station along the path of annihilation and the first step towards the station of dissolution. It is the point where the most accomplished of the beginners meet the strides of those who are already advanced. It is of 3 degrees. Unusual 3 degrees is of the beginners, the elect, and the elect of the elect. At the lowest level, it is love that cuts away any doubts and whisperings, revels in service, and brushes away afflictions. It is a love that grows from contemplating the bounties of Allah, and is reinforced by following the prescribed patterns of action and devotion, and grows with the need for the beloved. At the second level, it is love that gives preference to the truth over all else, occupies the tongue by constant remembrance, and causes the heart to cling to witnessing the truth. It is love that emanates from contemplating the attributes, witnessing the signs, and being content with one's station of knowing. And the last form, the most realized form, is a gripping love that cuts all circumstance, overpowers the signs, and continues without let-up. This type of love is the peak of this gateway. Otherwise, it would only be the love of the tongue, and what all creation claims it has, and what reason it is decreed to be. My comment on this is that the word that from which mahabba derives is the hub, which is the noun love, and mahabba is the act of extending. The word itself, I must say, is not much evident in the Quran, and I think its spiritual significance has been eroded by its association with the kind of love that we are more easy for us to understand, which is physical, emotional, romantic, and even platonic. Now, these patterns of love have seeped into the vernacular, and I think even in the sacred language. So they have in them an element that is, I believe, incomplete. The far better word which is used in the Quran is wid, which is unconditional. And it has the right aspects in its descriptive part. And Allah refers to Himself as Al-Wadud. He does not refer to Himself in the Quran as Al-Mahbub, as Al-Wadud. It is an unconditional form, which is more of a field, more like an energy field, rather than a specific bond. It goes beyond the duality of bonding. And that kind of mawadda is in fact what I believe that Ansari is talking about. Mahabba probably was the right word 200-300 years ago, but its erosion through its overuse, misuse, and abuse in modern times creates a different connotation. So the true significance of this gateway is the gateway of Mawadda, which is the creation of this unencumbered, unconditional field, where in the final analysis there is no duality in it. And if you can divorce the subject and object of love from your understanding of it, then we have Mawadda. The second doorway is the doorway of ghira, or vigilance. It can also mean jealousy, but not jealousy as one is jealous for safeguarding a position or reputation. It's in that context rather than in the context of. And his Quran, bring them back to me. And he proceeded to strike their shanks and their necks. And in the actual ayah, it is I can't seem to find it here. Ansari says, vigilance is not to allow one's expectations or loss of patience to detract you from single-mindedness. At the first level, it is the vigilance of the faithful for retrieving what he or she has lost, conscious of what has been missed, and keen not to see it disappear. At the second level, it is to ensure that time is not wasted any longer. And this vigilance can be overpowering because it can lead to regret. If you're at an advanced age, such as I am, and you have not been through this path, it can very well lead to a sense of regret that you have wasted your time. So the earlier you start, the better it is, so that this sense of regret does not emerge, and rather what you have is vigilance, knowing that you have started and that you want to preserve what you have achieved. He says that time is quick to anger, unforgiving, and slow to return. And the last stage is the vigilance of the Gnostic, for the keenness of his or her inner sight, for protecting their inner secrets from tarnish, and for the self slipping back into mere open expectations. Vigilance, I say, is like, it is the quality of the bodyguard or the sentinel. In this case, who is the sentinel? This is the self trying to realize its need, realize its potential. And this inner sentinel, as it were, is there to safeguard jealously what one has acquired through effort and yearning, or through inspiration and guidance from Allah Ta'ala. It is to understand the meaning of time as a feature which can be best put to use into understanding and experiencing the passage of the Wayfarer from and to the world. So time in this context, in this level of evolution, spiritual evolution, its main purpose is to understand where we have come and to which end we are all moving. The third doorway is the doorway of shawq, of ardor, of yearning. And here his ayah is, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Man kana yarju liqa Allah, wa inna ajla Allah li'at. Whosoever desires the encounter with Allah, Allah's final destiny shall arrive. And he defines ardor or yearning as the upsurge of the heart towards what is absent. It's a very, very, very profound, I think, profound definition. It is, you know, something that you desire, that you want, and its absence overwhelms and overpowers you, and that response is the response of yearning and ardor. For the believer, it is a desire, a yearning for paradise, a place of security from fear, and joy in receiving what has been promised you. At the second stage, it is yearning for presence, the divine presence, for Allah. And this ardor which has been planted by the force of mawadda or love, it has grown from His graces, and to His attributes the heart has become attached. It is a yearning to be within the divine proximity. And in the last stage, it is an ardor as a fire that is fueled by the purity of love, ignoring the imperatives of mundane existence, and whose flames will not be extinguished until the appointed hour. Here we're getting to the point where it is very hard now to express the wayfarer's condition, I think, in just normal terms. This is the I of the matter, the eye of the essence. This is haqq al-yaqeen. It is where the entire affair becomes subsumed within your being, and you merge, as it were. There's a kind of exchange of DNAs, as it were. And one is consumed then by the force that pulls you to what you know is ever present. So it has degrees of intensity, like all fires, like all yearnings. At the first level, it is really the ardor of the true believers who conduct themselves with expectations of a promise being fulfilled. At the next level, it is an ardor that is seized by an unconditional love that comes from yielding to the One. And lastly, it is the essence of ardor, pure, intense longing that is fulfilled at each and every instant. So it is an ever-going aspect of it. The fourth door is the fourth door of qalaq, or apprehensiveness. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعجلت إليك ربي لترضى. And I hurried to you, my Lord, that you may be content with me. And Ansari said, apprehensiveness is to push forward with ardor at the expense of patience. If you recall, at an earlier stage, patience was a very important gateway into the matter. It is now superseded by her. So the rungs that we were at earlier, the rungs where patience was an important key to unlock that particular gateway, is now subsumed or gives way to ardor, which is apprehensiveness. That is, if ardor does not overcome patience, because you want the result, then you become apprehensive. It is of 3 degrees, he says. Apprehensiveness about staying in the realm of creation, and which annoys created beings. You no longer want to be in the realm of creation. You want to escape, and you want to be in the company of realized beings, and if they are not available or not around, you want to be away from contact with creation and with the problems of creation, and whenever you interact, you are apprehensive that they may change or alter your state. And he says here that it is a state where you welcome your end, your physical end, to escape the prison of existence. The second level is apprehensiveness that struggles with the intellect, enjoys audition or sama, and overcomes patience. And lastly, apprehensiveness that has no mercy, accepts no delays, and respects no one person. And my commentary on that is that what Ansari is referring to is really the anxiety of losing what you have already gained, and impatient about achieving the desired end. You are now on this path. You know that it's the correct path. The journey is there. Everything is fully equipped. Your vehicle is moving, and you want to move. You want to get there. Patience, which was a virtue in the early stages, is now a positive hindrance if it stops you from reaching your goal. And things like, for example, sama, which are there to create, to agitate in you the power of heart, and become a tool, become a vehicle by which you can enter into this realm. And apprehensiveness itself, or anxiety, it is also a fear that the tricks of the mind and logic and reason might pull you back again. So it's not that you abandon mind and logic and reason. It's that you always are aware that if you allow these faculties to transgress, to move into the realm where they do not have a a role to play, then they will deflect or detract what you are seeking. The fifth doorway is a doorway of thirst or atash. And here, Ansari starts with the Quranic ayah. When night enveloped him, he saw a star. He said, "This is my Lord." Of course, with reference to Nabi Allah Ibrahim. He wanted signs. He was thirsty for a confirmation of the presence. And he wanted to see physically and in his own inner being the reality of this presence. And that's why he was seeking lordship, and he was thirsty for lordship. And he saw it in various forms until he jettisoned them all and yielded to the one. And Ansari says, thirst is a term for an obsessive search for the promise. It's spot on, I believe. The first of those on the early stages of this journey is for a witness or a sign or an inflection that can confirm it. It is in some ways what Nabi Allah Ibrahim wanted or sought. At the second stage, you want your quest to end. You want the day where all the scales will fall to arrive. You want a halting point where you can stop finally in repose. And in the last stage, the most accomplished or realized form of thirst, it's the thirst of the lover for a clear manifestation that has no shadow nor a veil of separation, a confirmation that there are no further stations to seek. The thirst, as it were, changes its intensity and its form. I mean, the thirst that comes if you suck at a lemon is different from the thirst that comes if you deny water, or the thirst that comes if you have a salty drink. Each one of these levels, each one of these stations, as it were, has its own degree of thirstiness. And in the last stage, where you seek the manifestations of the one without any layers of shadows, without any veils of shadows, knowing that beyond this station there really is no other, there's nothing, it's nullification of being beyond that station. And that leads inexorably to ecstasy, what he calls wedged. And his ayah is Quranic ayah, and we strengthened their hearts when they rose up. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَرَبَطْنَا عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ إِذْ قَامُوا. Ansari says, ecstasy is a flame that increases in power when it faces that which disturbs it. I suppose what disturbs it could be like oxygen to the fire. But to breathe, sometimes you see the flame becoming that much more intense. It is of 3 degrees. Ecstasy that is ignited by a passing event that awakens spiritual listening, seeing, or reflecting. It may or may not have a lasting effect on a person. The second stage is ecstasy that awakens the soul with an eternal light, or a primordial sound, or a true force of attraction. It can impart a cloak of awareness, or its light might persist. And the last stage is ecstasy that whisks the person from the 2 worlds, the world of the earth and the cosmos, and the seen and the unseen, liberating the wayfarer from all that is material. He calls it water and clay. If the person is so seized, his or her own name is lost to one. Alternatively, it could impart onto the person its own name. And here, in the last stage, obviously, one has to be, again, the issue of courtesy, of adab and bounds has to come in. The great Sufi mystic, Khawaja, when he expressed in his ecstatic frame, an al-haq, he took on, I am the truth. In its own way, it's true, because he had lost his sense of being. He was no longer able to distinguish self from soul. He had become basically completely transparent. But it is also unutterable. And he realized it later. Khawaja realized it later. And in his trial, he stood up and he said, he demanded that he be executed for transgressing the bounds. And he said, in Arabic, اقتلوني يا ثقاتي فإن في مماتي حياتي. Kill me, my trusted ones, for there is life in my death. Now he had seen the truth. He had seen al-haq, I am the truth. But he assumed the name of the truth without permission from the truth, even though what he said was true. Once one gets to this level of spiritual realization, you are in a state of muted astonishment or dahsh. And his Quranic ayah, this is the seventh doorway. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. فَلَمَّا رَأَيْنَهُ أَكْبَرْنَاهُ. When they saw him, they greatly admired. Astonishment, Ansari says, is the wayfarer's astonishment is the wayfarer's condition if one's intellect, patience, or knowledge is overpowered. It is of 3 degrees. Astonishment of the adept when his or her state engulfs one's knowledge, when ecstasy overpowers one's potential. And by that he means qadra, which is the inner force, and when unveiling covers solicitude. Astonishment of the wayfarer when gatheredness collects separate forms, when the outcome precedes the event, and when the witness sees only one soul. And here the astonishment is when you start seeing things, the interconnectedness of things falling in front of you as a matter of routine. It's like this, the wings of the butterfly in Beijing creating a tornado in I don't know where. This seeing it instantaneously, the interconnectedness of it, gives you this kind of sense of muted astonishment. And lastly, astonishment of the lover when the intimation of union surrounds the bounties of graces, when the light of proximity overshadows the light of mercy, and the yearning of witnessing overcomes that in the expectation of the actual event. Astonishment, I said, is a dazzle associated with spiritual attainment. The lights of recognition increase with intensity as one proceeds along the stations. Of course, at the beginning you are amazed by your inner insight, your inner sight, drilling, as it were, into outer realities. And you begin to have a panorama of associations that are due to this. The interconnectedness of things, as I said, become manifest really immediately. And you don't need to make a conscious linkage. They emerge practically, spontaneously. And at the last stages, for those few realized beings, it is the seeing the light of proximity displace all else, including whatever shadows or illusions exist of separateness. And when that happens, you become overwhelmed. But you enter the 8th gateway, the gate of Hayaman. And this is what Moses experienced when he fell senseless. And Moses collapsed senseless. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَخَرَّ مُوسَى صَعْقًا. He collapsed senseless. Being overwhelmed is to abandon wonder or perplexity. It is a firmer and more durable station than astonishment. It is of 3 degrees. The first flickers of being overwhelmed when the adept embarks on his or her quest and recognizes one's inadequacies, one's lonely position, one's lowly position in trivial reality. Overwhelmed, secondly, by the pounding waves of verification when its proofs become evident, and its wonders become continuous, and its light bursts through. And lastly, overwhelmed by the first footsteps in the reality of non-time, seeing the master of eternity and drowning in the sea of unveiling. The sense of being overwhelmed is very much akin to drowning. And it confirms the inadequacy of the will or the desire to master the condition that one is in. And if it's of thrashing about to regain your foothold is useless, because you have abandoned your dependence, not only on your outer faculties, but on others. So drowning, this kind of spiritual drowning, becomes into a doorway, into engagement with another set of realities, more true and lasting. And as these realities are confirmed, verified, you scale new heights, as it were, in a vertical drowning, rather than, you don't go into the Mariana Trench downwards, you go into its opposite upwards. But the opposite has no limit. Rising to the heights rather than sinking to the depths. And here, a different force applies. It's the force of the barq, lightning. And Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, إِذَا رَأَى نَارًا, and when he saw a fire. A flash of lightning, Ansari says, beckons the adept and invites him or her to enter the path. The difference between it and ecstasy is that ecstasy occurs after one has entered the path. Ecstasy is a reward, while lightning flashes are a permission to enter. It is of 3 degrees. The flash of lightning that shines from the side of the promised end in response to sincere pleading. The adept happily accepts whatever is offered, ignoring all the side effects, and accepts the bitterness of living with degrees. The flash of lightning that shines from the side of the promised end in response to the urgings of caution. The adept sees only the shortness of the road, becomes indifferent to creation, and is urged to purify his inner awareness. And lastly, the flash of lightning that shines from the side of the subtle graces, illuminating the impoverishment of the wayfarer, giving rise to the clouds of joy and the raindrops of ecstasy onto the rivers of bliss. My own commentary of that is the barq, that, or the lightning flash that Ansari is talking about, it's like a chariot that you ride. It's like riding a chariot of light. The pathway is either towards the divine presence, undertaken in full awareness, or by the divine presence, whose guiding chariot is a lightning flash. This is a common theme in Tasawwuf, is that the journey has 4 aspects to it, and Mullah Sadra talks about it. It's the journey from creation to the One. The journey from the One to the One. The journey from the One to creation, and then the journey from the One to yourself. So it's a circle. We are now entering the second one, where you are not journeying towards the divine presence. You are within the divine presence and moving within its perimeters, as it were, limitless perimeters. So the beginning of this phase of the journey is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not creation. And the steed that you mount is a steed of barq, or lightning. It is a passage inside Allah's names and attributes. It's not a passage to Allah's names and attributes. And Allah's names and attributes are the emanation of His essence. So the journey from the world of existence to the One is different from the journey inside the names and attributes. The steed which the wayfarer mounts in the latter case is the flash of lightning. At the first stage, the flash is a confirmation of the promised land. In the second stage, the flash has a different purpose. It cautions the wayfarer about the hubris of his or her ways, and urges them to be prepared for all outcomes. And the last stage is the knowledge and certainty of the wayfarer's absolute impoverishment. That becomes the doorway into harmony in the night, which is the last doorway of taste or dhawq. And Ansari uses the Quranic ayah very short on parts of the ayah, and this is the reminder. Ansari says, taste is more durable than ecstasy and clearer than lightning. It is of 3 degrees. The tasting by verification of the fruits of efforts, without any doubts and unburdened by expectations of hope. The tasting by the will of the fruits of intimacy, without interruptions or impediments, and with no possibility of separating from it. And lastly, the tasting by separateness of the fruits of union, and the tasting by solicitude of the fruits of gatheredness. Taste or dhawq is a key word in the science, as it were, of the inner way. It is both a state as well as a predisposition, and it is manifested in different guises throughout the journey. The entire period of preparation that I spoke of is predicated on a person having the taste for this endeavor. As I maybe clumsily said, you cannot consume a meal if you are allergic to one or more of its ingredients, or if you cannot abide the dish. This is a matter of your essential viewpoint. You can acquire a taste, there's no doubt about it. But it's not the same as having an instinctive taste for something. And it is one of the necessary qualities that must be prevalent, I think, in the early stages of the journey. And the nature of that taste changes as you progress. Again, using the analogy or the metaphor of taking a meal, a taste for simple dishes may not be sustained as the meal becomes more complex, and vice versa. You may like to have very simple meals, but if the meal becomes more complex and elaborate, you may not have a liking to it. Or you may like very complex, French foods with all kinds of sauces, but you may not therefore enjoy a piece of grilled cheese or whatever, being a vegetarian. So this science is really not for everyone. I think you have to be clear and open with yourself. It is only for those with the taste and whose spiritual taste buds metamorphose as the journey progresses. As it becomes more difficult, or as it becomes more easy, as the nature of the forces acting on you change, as you move from going to the one and acting by the one. All of these require, each of these stages require a taste for them. And dropping out, quote unquote, is therefore not something, it is not an admission of failure. It's just your taste does not, or your predisposition, this mix of predisposition, desire, taste, and will does not push you forward. And in this case, it explains why taste, dhawq, is a higher quality to have than either inspiration, ecstasy, or bedazzlement. So this is how I will then end this seventh discourse.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.